A change that's happening right now in the Indo-Pacific, with the Taiwan Strait right at the heart of it.
You know, for decades, the United States military operated from a position of incredible advantage. Its overseas air bases were considered sanctuaries, right? Safe havens, well out of reach of any real threat. But as this quote from a recent RAND Corporation analysis puts it so bluntly, that time is over. A much more dangerous reality is setting.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about what it means for these sanctuaries to be gone. Then we'll get into the specifics of China's missile advantage. After that, we'll look at the war games, what the first few weeks of a conflict might actually look like. That'll lead us to a huge question, the mainland strike dilemma. And finally, we'll explore what it even means to deter a war in this completely new environment.
All right, so to really get a handle on how much things have changed, we've got to go back a bit. We need to look at the mindset that has really defined American air power for more than 30 years, ever since the first Gulf War back in '91.
Think about it. This was the core of U.S. military strategy, the ability to launch wave after wave of aircraft from bases that were, for all intents and purposes, untouchable. This wasn't just about fighting wars. It was the foundation of deterrence. It let America reassure its allies and warn its adversaries that overwhelming air power was always ready to go.
Well, that strategic landscape has been completely upended. And China's military modernization, as we're about to see, has been laser-focused on taking that exact advantage away.
Now you have to understand the geography of this region to get the strategy. The first island chain, it's this series of islands that basically fences in the Chinese mainland. It's the front line, and U.S. bases on these islands are absolutely vital for responding to a crisis. But their location is a double-edged sword, because that same proximity makes them incredibly vulnerable. And this is the key insight into the strategy. Chinese planners figured, why try to shoot down America's most advanced stealth jets in the air? That's the hardest way to do it. Why not just prevent them from ever taking off? By focusing on the bases themselves, these fixed, obvious, hard-to-defend runways, the People's Liberation Army believes it can neutralize U.S. air power right at the start.
And here are the tools they've built to do it. Just look at these numbers from the Department of Defense. China has poured immense resources into building this massive arsenal of ground-launched missiles. We're not talking about a handful, we're talking about thousands of missiles with different ranges, a force that is tailor-made to simply overwhelm and saturate U.S. bases across the entire region.
Okay, so you see the arsenal, but what would that actually look like if a conflict broke out? Well, this is where military planners turn to war games and advanced simulations to try and figure out what would happen in those critical first few days.
And the results of these simulations are, well, they're pretty grim. According to the RAND war games, the opening salvos of Chinese missiles are just devastatingly effective. They punch through missile defenses, they crater the runways, and they shut down fighter jet operations from key bases in Japan for almost 12 days. In a modern, high-intensity conflict, 12 days is an eternity.
And it gets worse when you look at the big birds, the tankers that refuel the fighters, and the long-range bombers. For them, the disruption is even more severe. In Japan, you could be looking at over a month before those runways are ready. And without tankers, the reach of those fighter jets shrinks dramatically. It's a logistical nightmare. Of course, the U.S. Air Force hasn't just been sitting back and watching this happen. They've been developing a countermeasure called RADAR, or Rapid Airfield Damage Recovery. The entire goal here is one thing: speed. How do you patch up a runway that's just been blown to pieces while you're still under attack to get your planes back into the fight?
It's basically a three-step sprint. First, you have to assess the chaos, figure out what's damaged. Then comes the really dangerous part. EOD teams have to go out and clear unexploded bombs and submunitions. Only then can these new teams of multi-capable airmen get to work, filling craters and slapping on a new surface. And all of this is a race against the clock, because you know the next wave of missiles is already on its way.
So this brutal new reality, where your bases are under constant fire from the word go, it forces an incredibly difficult, almost impossible strategic choice on any American president. This right here is one of the heaviest questions in U.S. national security today. Your bases are hit. Your people are hurt. Do you hit back at the source? Do you authorize strikes against the missile launchers, against the command centers on the Chinese mainland? Because the moment you do, you are running a terrifying risk of escalation with a nuclear-armed power. But if you don't, are you giving up? Are you letting the enemy dictate the terms of the fight? And you can see there's just no easy answer. The experts are completely split. On one side, you have people saying you have to strike back. It's the only way to degrade their ability to keep attacking you, and it shows you won't be pushed around.
But the other side warns about starting an uncontrollable spiral towards nuclear war, about losing the support of allies who don't want to be part of that, and just the sheer uncertainty of what Beijing would do next.
What the research from RAND shows is that this decision would depend heavily on the specifics. How the war started matters a lot. If it's a clear, unprovoked attack on U.S. forces, support for striking back goes way up. The scale of the response also matters. A limited strike is much easier to approve than an all-out campaign. And yeah, even the personal backgrounds of the president and their advisors could play a huge role in that final, fateful call.
So when you put it all together, your bases are vulnerable and your best response is incredibly risky. The old playbook for how you deter a war, well, you have to throw it out and write a new one. So the new way of thinking is moving away from just relying on these big, vulnerable American bases. The idea now is to shift the load. Empower allies like Japan and others to be the first line of defense. Let them use their own jets, their own defenses, to blunt that initial attack. Their job is to contest the airspace and buy time. Precious, precious time for U.S. forces to absorb the first punch, repair the damage, and get back in the fight.
And this quote really brings it all home. Any conflict in the Pacific today isn't going to be another Gulf War, where air power operated from a safe distance. The analysis says it's going to look a lot more like the Battle of Britain, a grinding, brutal fight with your bases under constant attack. And that means being prepared to pay a very, very heavy price, both in lives and in incredibly expensive equipment.
So, at the end of the day, all of this, all the new training, the runway repair drills, the coordination with allies, it's not actually about getting better at fighting a war, it's about preventing one from ever happening. The whole game is to convince Beijing that an attack is just not worth it, that no matter what they throw at us, the US and its allies can take the hit and keep fighting, making any hope of a quick, clean victory impossible. And that really is the fundamental question. The old formula, the one that kept the peace for decades, is broken. So what comes next? Finding a new formula for deterrence, a new way to ensure stability in an era where there are no safe havens. That is one of the most urgent and difficult challenges the world faces today.